Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday, January 20th special meeting of the Infrastructure Services Committee. I'd like to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the traditional territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have a short but meaningful agenda today, and I think the way we're going to handle it is to divide it into water and then garbage. So, can I see a motion to adopt our agenda? Moved, seconded. Any changes, amendments, other considerations? Jim Rosenboom.
Is your plan to have the second presentation prior to the second report?
Yes. So the idea is to receive all the reports, then do all the water stuff, then assuming how far along we are in the meeting, perhaps take a break, and then go to the waste disposal option. So if that works for everybody, that's how we're going to proceed. So all in favor.
That was my question. Awesome.
Okay. All in favor of the agenda? Any opposed? Seeing none. Excellent. I'm glad we are not opposed to the agenda. So do I see a motion to receive all reports? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Good, we have received all the reports and there is no communications. So that's great. Let us kick off this exciting day and start with water, groundwater. And we have a delegation from Calwi Water Dynamics, Inc. Did I get that right?
You want to do the Dutch one? Is Ineke Kalwij?
Yes. So I can, shall I share the screen then?
Yeah.
Let me see how to do that. Yeah. This presentation. Yes. Okay, well, good morning, and thank you for having me. This presentation is about the work completed under the groundwater investigation program that started in 2017. This 2020 work is focused on finding additional groundwater supply sources that are required to make up of the remaining shortfall. As we understand it, the development of the Church Road wellfield will address about 45% of the water deficit. So the work completed in 2020 is the groundwater investigation phase 2, part 2. So part 2 is a continuation from the previous work completed in 2017 and will include additional well site locations not previously explored. And then phase 3 is the Cray Creek site, which explores alternative well drilling sites in that area in follow-up of work completed in 2018. So overall, the project scope ranges from test well drilling site selection. So the geographic area was known, but still what was required is to pinpoint the exact test well drilling location. Fieldwork implementation is everything related to the test well drilling, pumping test completion, the 48-hour pumping test, as well as hydrogeological fieldwork. I have added some illustrations to give a bit of an idea what the fieldwork entails. So the well drilling in progress. I always display the soil samples. That always helps to better identify and organize the groundwater samples and identify the different formations. The analysis really pertains to grain size analysis, determination of the groundwater supply potential. Then we have the cost estimate part. Groundwater source risk really has to do with other potential sources, but when it comes to land use and as well as groundwater at risk of containing pathogens. Task 3 also includes the work completed leading to the multiple criteria workshop. So just in short, so these are the well sites. So they are numbered in sequence of drilling. So we started off in Maryanne West Park. So that will be test well number 1. Then we continued in the next site, the Langdale site. That will be test well number 2. Then we moved over to Cray Creek, which is test well number 3. And then the last one, which was completed in December, is on the Harman Road in Roberts Creek area. So what I do is I just briefly go over each test well drilling site, touch upon main findings, key findings. So starting off at Maryanne West Park, excellent location. We were very lucky with the weather there. So that always gives good illustrations as well. So what I show here is on the right, it just shows the colors. The colored is the borehole lithology, so it goes with depth, and next to it I have the test well schematic. So green color overall suggests medium sand, coarse sand. The brownish orange brown is more a finer formation, and yellow is really like sand. So this kind of gives a bit of an idea about the different formation we encountered during the test well drilling. The blue area, where I mentioned aquifer, that's the section where the aquifer is. So the aquifer started around 79 meters below, at a depth of 79 meters. Overall medium to coarse sand and some gravel. And at the end, the completed drilling depth is 128 meters. We went a little bit deeper to better understand how deep the aquifer actually is and what is the formation underneath the aquifer. But at the end, the well was completed at 108 meters. So following well construction, we completed a pumping test, which we could operate at about 17.5 liters per second. For this purpose, we also monitored groundwater levels at Maryanne Road observation well location, and we noted there was no interference at that location noticeable. At the same time of the pumping test, we collected water samples for water quality analysis, and the results suggest for this particular location excellent groundwater. All the parameters meet Canadian drinking water guidelines. So the second site was Langdale. This was again a very good location. In this case, it was kind of interesting because we had information of the existing Langdale well, so we had a little bit of an idea what to expect. But we decided to drill a little bit further to better understand lithology. And a good finding was that underneath the fine sand, which was still water bearing, we found again aquifer formation, which was good producing. So in this case, this test well, we were able to complete at a greater depth than the existing Langdale well, which is favorable because that allows for additional drawdown. So this well, we were able to test successfully for 48 hours at a pumping rate of about 22 liters per second. We monitored the drawdown at the existing Langdale well, which was roughly the distance between the two is 12.5 meters. So it suggests a certain 3.6 meters of well interference. Again, we took for this water samples. As such, it is very good water. It meets the Canadian drinking water guidelines. We only observed when it comes to aesthetic objectives that iron and manganese concentrations were exceeded the guidelines. So in this case, further testing is required, whether that is something that is really part of the groundwater chemistry, or that further flushing will reduce these concentrations. So the third site, Cray Creek, it's a very nice location to drill in that area. It is a bit more remote located than the other ones. In this case, it has a proximity to Cray Creek. The aquifer started around 9 meters below ground. It is about a 15 meters aquifer thickness, what you will see here illustrated on the right. Overall, again, like all the previous sites, it is all overall the aquifer formation is this medium coarse sand and gravel formation. This one, in this site, we also noticed, especially during well development, that there's a lot of fine sediments in it. In this site, we encountered bedrock at around 33 meters. But as such, we were able to install a screen longer than the other ones, about 5 meters in length. And we were able to pump this well nicely at a roughly 6.3 liters per second. At the same, for this well, we also collected water samples, and the analysis suggests, again, very good water based on the water chemistries. The only observation is that the pH is less than 7, which is just below the operating guidelines. But again, this requires retesting to see if this is something that is part of the water, or that it is that it varies over time. So the last site, Harman Road. In this case, we drilled through sand and gravel formation as well as bedrock. The idea at this site was that, okay, if we don't find adequate yield in the unconsolidated in the sand and gravel, we proceed to bedrock to see if there's any potential in the in water-bearing fractures. So in this case, we did find a water-bearing formation around 39 meters, but it was just a very thin aquifer, so not really suitable for further completing a well at that depth. So we proceeded into bedrock up to about 244 meters, and 2 water-bearing fractures were encountered, and an estimated yield of just under 1 liter per second. So just as a summary of the findings, so the tested pumping rates shows first. Then based on that, I look at what could be the production well potential. Note that it is a bit of a conservative approach to it, but what it shows, and based on what we pumped it at, based on the available drawdown I see at the end of a pumping test, these are reasonable production well potential estimations based on what can be derived from a 6-inch diameter test well. With the note that the Langdale well, that's why I also propose on everywhere the plus number behind it, that there is likely potential for an increased, for a higher yield, mainly related to the fact that if you go to a production well stage, we change from a 6-inch diameter to a 12-inch diameter production well that increases the well screen diameter, and that allows for much more water to enter into the well, and it would basically increase well efficiency. Kind of a rule of thumb is about 10% to assume. So all these 3 well sites have a well field development potential. So that would suggest 2 or more production wells. And based on the water quality results, all are excellent. I just mentioned good for Langdale based on the elevated iron and manganese concentrations. So a suggestion there is that if these elevated iron and manganese concentrations persist with pumping, either water treatment or blending with existing water system supply may be required. And in the case of Cray Creek site regarding the pH, so if it is going to be consistently less than 7, it may require treatment in order to raise the pH. And that also relates then to the effectiveness of the chlorination. So we completed a preliminary assessment of the so-called groundwater at risk of containing pathogens. So basically we look at different aspects, the well construction aspects, the intake depth, the proximity to potential sources of contamination, and we determine if there is any risks, any pathogen risks. So in summary, based on a preliminary assessment for all 3 sites, the main finding was that because all the septic systems in all of the areas, that the most probable source of contamination is septic disposal fields. And all these aquifers do not have clearly a barrier to viral transport. And what health likes to see when they talk about barrier is really a thick aquitar, a thick layer of silt and clay formation. And all these 3 aquifers do not have that clearly identified. So all 3 sites should be assumed to be at risk of containing pathogens, but in this case, this risk can be mitigated with chlorination, and chlorination is already something that the SARD has in place for the supply sources. Another preliminary assessment we completed was the likelihood of a stream-aquifer interaction. So in other words, if you were to operate the pump, would that influence the stream in terms of water levels? In case of Maryanne West Park, that's most nearest by creek is Chester Creek. But given the topography, the depth of the well, it's unlikely that there is that it is hydraulically connected. In case of Langdale Creek, again, based on the elevation difference between the creek and the well, the depth of the well, and the fact that it screens a deeper aquifer formation below the sand, a finer formation, it is unlikely that it is directly hydraulically connected, but in this case, probably further study is required to confirm this. In case of Cray Creek, we can assume that it is likely hydraulically connected. The test well site is about 60 meters from the creek, and given the depth, it seems likely. So on January 6, a multiple criteria analysis workshop was completed. This was designed and carried out with SCRD staff and my project team. So we look at 4 different groups of criteria, and each group has sub-criteria. So when it comes to the groundwater source, we looked at the production well potential, water quality, and source protection considerations. Economic aspects, of course, what is the well construction costs, costs related to infrastructure, possible energy costs, and we looked at an estimated cost per liter per second, and then possible water treatment assumptions. The third category looked at regulatory considerations and possible environmental flow need requirements. Again, that relates to the surface groundwater interaction. Is there any confirmation of large ground users in the well area? And the anticipated ease of obtaining a groundwater license. And then as fourth category, we had a more general, practical and other considerations. So we looked at land ownership, available space, well field development potential, resiliency, and local archaeology. So these are the results. So basically each sub-criteria we would give, so each of these sub-criteria, we would give it either a 1, 2, or 3. That's the overall score that could be given. And then each sub-criteria has also its individual weight, but then the overall weight, this is the 45%, 30% suggests how we weighted the 4 criteria in relation to each other. So most importance was given to the groundwater source category. So overall, what this shows, so in short, so the higher the score, the better the site for groundwater development. And what the results really show is that overall the sites score quite similar, and all really receive 70% of the total score. So that kind of tells that all 3 sites are very suitable. I did complete a little bit of a sensitivity analysis, altering the percentage and the individual weights, but even that will give a similar picture about the suitability or the feasibility of each of the test well drilling sites for potential well development, groundwater development. So based on all the work that has been completing, the analyzing of the results, the workshop, we feel that all 3 sites are suitable for well development. And at the same time, there's really potential for developing a well field at each site. The advantage of always having a well field, so at least 2 wells at the production well at one site, is then you always will have a mechanical backup at your well field should for some reason one well be offline for a period of time. All 3 sites have good water quality. There's not a single parameter where applicable. There are issues. All meet maximum acceptable concentrations for those parameters who have that guideline limit. It is expected that only chlorination is required for all 3 test well sites. As I mentioned earlier, there is a pathogen risk, but all those risks can be mitigated with chlorination, and that's a practice that is currently already in place with SCRD's water sources. So really based on the work I completed and looking at the performance and looking at the outcome of the workshop, the recommendation is really we can proceed with developing of a well field comprising of 2 production wells, and that's feasible for all 3 sites. In addition to that, I think we think it is important to consider implementation of long-term groundwater monitoring. It will really help with future aquifer and management initiatives, and it will tell you more about really how the aquifer the groundwater trends are over time. Related to Langdale Creek and Cray Creek, we would recommend to undertake technical analysis and monitoring in support of future water license applications and possible future effects. So this is the final slide. So this is just a summary based on, and it reflects the cost estimate if each of the site were to be developed with as a well field with 2 production wells. So when it comes to the construction costs, it really includes the construction, the hydrogeology site, the engineering, the well design site, all permitting and additional studies. Infrastructure costs pertain to the building, mechanical, electrical, civil engineering, additional permitting as well. And then the water main. So basically to tie in it would be then from the pump house to the existing water system. So what this shows basically that the main that Langdale one would be the site where the additional water main would be the longest, so more costly. We added here a cost per liter per second, just to give a little bit more perspective in terms of if you were to develop a well field, how does that relate to the cost of the anticipated well field potential? And then as well, we include here the energy cost in terms of withdrawn or pumped water. Dollars per pumped water. So, yeah, so this is the overall presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and the photos were helpful. If you could stop screen sharing for a minute so that I can see what folks are up to.
How do I do that? Oh, I'll stop share. There it is.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Unless anybody has a burning question, I think we'll go straight to our staff report, and then we'll take all of the accumulated questions at once. So over to you, GM Rosenboom.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. Thank you, Ineke, for your presentation. The purpose of the staff report is to seek board direction on next steps with respect to the development of groundwater sources. The presentation we just received from our consultant provided a summary of the opportunities for the development of well fields at the location tested and drilled in 2020. The staff report has an appendix which provides a summary of these results. The full detailed report is still forthcoming, but we found it important to present this to you today and not wait for the final detailed analysis be completed, because that can take another several weeks. And in terms of budget proposals and budget timing, we found it important to present this information to you today. Staff considered the findings of the study by our consultant in the context of other water supply development options and the final financial perspective of the regional water system service. Based on this analysis, staff recommend to advance the development of the well field at the BC Ferry Terminal in Langdale. A well field at this location could be commissioned in 2024. That's what we estimate based on current information. At the Great Creek site, staff conclude that upgrading the existing surface water intake we have at Great Creek would be significantly more cost effective and could likely provide a larger amount of water than could be developed at the tested groundwater site. The upgraded surface water intake could be commissioned in about 2024-2025. Staff therefore conclude that to advance the feasibility of upgrading the existing surface water intake before advancing the development of a well field at this location. At the Maryanne West Park, staff are recommending to implement a monitoring program to confirm the sustainability of the well field at this location before advancing the development of the well field here. And it's all to deal with the fact that the well in Maryanne West Park is located in the same aquifer as Church Road and the town of Gibson sites. And recent discussions amongst hydrological consultants of the three parties identified that there is some unknown information about the actual recharge of the aquifer, so more monitoring is required there. With the development of a well field at Langdale and the upgrade to the surface water system at Great Creek, a total flow of between 75 and 100 liters a second could be achieved. This would be sufficient to fully address the water supply deficit as we currently have estimated for 2025. And staff would be more than happy to answer any questions the committee might have. And in terms of staff here present, I'm here today together with our capital projects coordinator, Trevor Rutley, as our manager for capital projects, Stephen Mizarek, is working on the initiation of the work on the landslide work project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I myself have many questions that have popped into my mind, but I'm going to let other people come first. So do all rush to stick up your hands. First, I'll recognize Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 4 of the report, the staff report, under the Maryanne West Park, and as you indicated that this is in the same aquifer as the Church Road well field under development and town of Gibson's wells. I know when we were looking, the regional district board was looking at Mahan Road and the fact that it was impacting the Gibson's aquifer, there was a decision by the board not to move forward with that. So I'm wondering, where does the town of Gibson sit on this at this point around this one, given it's in the same aquifer?
Is it a question for staff or for?
Well, I guess it would be probably for Director Beamish, but then, have staff had conversations with, staff at the town of Gibson's?
What I can say is that it's part of the discussions around Church Road. There has been very intensive and very productive discussions between myself, the CEO of the town of Gibsons, and Ministry of Flindborough staff, and all our three-party hydrogeologists on the actual working of Aquifer 560, which is the actual aquifer in question. And those discussions have resulted in some common understanding of what is known for the aquifer and what is unknown for the aquifer. And that's an understanding that wasn't as common and as broadly understood as at the time of the Mahan Road discussion. And that's actually the reason why staff are recommending to not put this site totally aside, but collect more information, because the parties at that time, just before Christmas, agreed that there might be potential, but we don't know, and that's what we need to confirm. So before we incur a lot of sunk costs in putting all kind of bigger wells in there, we suggest to improve the knowledge of the aquifer if it's decided to not advance the development of a well field at that location. At least there is a better understanding of the working of the aquifer, which would benefit us all in terms of, because it's the same aquifer that's providing water to Church Road. So a better understanding of the working of the aquifer would benefit both the town of Gibsons and the SRD regardless. And not sure if Mayor Beamish, I see you're muted as well.
I just wanted to jump in for a second, because when I read the aquifer study a couple of years ago, it showed the map of the aquifer, which did not include this area. So I take it that further investigation has shown that the Gibsons aquifer is actually larger than was shown on the map.
In 2019, the province updated its aquifer mapping, and that extended the boundaries of aquifer 560 to the west and to the east. Soames didn't used to be included in the same aquifer and is now considered to be part of the same aquifer. So that is a change that occurred in 2019. It expanded the scope and brought these two areas into the same aquifer.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
No, I appreciate the good report, by the way, on the wells. Very interesting and easy to read and follow the technical data that was presented. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the cautious approach taken with respect to the wells, both with Maryanne West and Church Road relative to Gibsons. So that I certainly support that continued study going forward without a decision to move forward into a production well. Maryanne West is already decision to move forward as and when we can on Church Road, and I think that's appropriate. But further studies indicated, and the staff and the town, along with Ministry of Environment, are working together on that, and I support that process. So thank you for that.
Okay. I don't see any hands up, which is baffling. Oh, look, there's one now. Director Hiltz.
Yes, absolutely. I have a hand up. Yeah, thank you for the report and the exploration, and overall, for me, what I see is we're diversifying sources, both surface water, groundwater, and geographically diversifying them. So for me, it's the report's definitely going in the right direction. And I do have kind of I'm not sure if it's a staff or a consulting question. The monitoring program, which is in the consultant's recommendation, I don't see anything in the staff report about the monitoring program. So is there something forthcoming about to implement a monitoring program? I don't think and it would have to be between the town of Gibsons, MOE, and SERD. So is there any movement to figure out how to do this?
Thank you for the question. There has been some initial discussions, but I think that's the work that would need to occur would be the development and implementation of one in collaboration with the other parties. So there's currently no program yet. So the funding suggested for that site is really to allow for a consultant to assist us with the development in conjunction with the other parties involved, so that we agree on the objectives and the sites, etc., etc.
Thank you. Over to Director Ties.
Thank you. Probably about 1,000 questions, but I'll start with one. First of all, thank you for Holland for providing us with all this water expertise, and I have a question regarding the surface intake on the Langdale well. Is it just a matter of adding more treatment or screening so that the turbidity gets decreased, or is there like larger infrastructure upgrades needed?
Staff.
Thank you. I think you mentioned Langdale well, but I think you referred to Great Creek.
Yes, my apologies. Yes, Great Creek.
Okay. So we currently have an intake structure there and filtration that only allows for chlorination, while Great Creek in the summer or during the rest of the year has with a little bit of higher flow, has a high turbidity. So it indeed would require sediment removal capacity. We're currently thinking maybe a membrane filter that can take out the turbidity levels, so that we would be able to meet health standards for surface water intakes. And besides that, we might need to put in UV ultraviolet as well as secondary treatment above chlorination. So there will be some treatments required. We currently have a small building there, so we hope to be able to see if we can fit it in the same building, or maybe we need to expand it a little bit.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, Director Ties took the majority of my question away, which was with regards to Great Creek and what additional treatment we might need if we did a surface intake versus a well intake. So thank you, GM Rosenboom, for answering those. I guess the other question I had with regards to Great Creek, we have a license for it currently. Does that license cover off enough draw? Do we need to increase that license? What does that process look like?
Thank you for the question. We have a license which far exceeds what we're currently drawing in the summer. And if we are allowed to draw from it in the summer, it exceeds that. And we foresee that we won't be able to draw a lot more in the summer than we have been doing, because there might not be a lot more in the creek. We have a license. We don't need to get a new license. The only thing that we might need to do is update the license with the fact that we have additional treatment on site, but that is a minor amendment which won't be an issue. So in terms of the regulatory process, it would be pretty straightforward at Great Creek.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in right now with two questions about the Maryanne West well. One was asked by a constituent: will this in any way interfere with use of the playing field? And the other one is that, just for an idea of size, I was wondering how the Maryanne West well compares to the existing Chester well that's on our system.
I'm looking here to Mr. Rutley, but I think what we're currently drawing from Chester is less than what we think we can draw from Maryanne. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that the current Chester well produces roughly somewhere in the range of 15 to 17 liters a second in the summer, and the projected flow provided by our consultant was 19 liters a second plus, which would likely improve with a larger diameter test well.
Good. And will the playing field be impacted by having a well next to it?
Thank you. Or I'll leave that to you.
Go ahead, Ricky. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Thanks for the question, Chair. The physical infrastructure within the vicinity of the playing field, currently the wellhead is there. All that we need to really remain on site is the wellhead contained within a kiosk. It's set back enough from the playing field that we don't anticipate any long-term impacts, and staff have collaborated with staff from the SCRD Parks Department as well in siting it, and any other additional wells within the area would certainly be discussed with the SCRD Parks Department to find the most suitable locations to minimize impacts to the park use.
Excellent. Thank you. Next up, Director Seegers.
Thank you. This is following up on Director Tighe and Director Toth. Just for clarity, given the treatment that is required at the 3 sites as indicated currently, would the treatment for each be at the site? The water does not need to go to the current treatment plant. It would be treated on site and then be in the system. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
that's correct. It's the same similar process as currently as we have in place, for example, at Chester Well, where there is next to the well, there's a small building with includes the chlorination equipment. And so on the sites where we need to only chlorinate, that will be the setup. And for example, the picture is called I showed for the Langdale site. There was a building in the back that currently holds a pump house as well as the treatment for the Langdale well system.
Okay. And then one final question. The recommendations that are provided to us on page 1 in the report, the second part of that, does that reflect what you were talking about with regards to the Maryanne West Park site? Or would we need to revise this? Because it's talking about developing a well field. We're not necessarily looking at that at this point. So does that need to be revised to reflect the assessment piece that we're going to do, the evaluation piece? You can think about that before we get to the recommendations. Thanks.
Okay. Director Tighe.
Chair, my question is, it looks like the 2 wells, the Langdale one as well as the Maryanne West one, are from what I've heard is unconfined, similar to the Dusty Road one. So I just want to see what the difference is between the risks that we chose to abandon Dusty Road, but we continued on with these ones and thought these ones were feasible. Thank you.
Staff.
Thank you for the question. The associated, the Dusty Road, we actually looked at it again as part of this project. Is there any potential? And I also had further discussions with our partners at the nation about it. And the risk for Dusty Road is really the gravel extraction potential in the catchment area. So given that there are gravel extraction plants all the way just from north of the well until close to Chapman Creek, the entire area is slated to be mined in upcoming decades. That would completely change the entire hydrology and hydrogeology in the area. So what we currently see as being a catchment area might not be a similar catchment area moving forward. And so I think besides the risk of contamination, just the uncertainty about how flows would flow in that area, I think that's the primary difference between it's just the development upstream, upslope, which is completely different, and those kind of developments are not happening on the other sides. Hope this clarifies.
Thank you. And finally, I'm interested in some of the co-benefits with the different sites. For instance, you know, if we had a major fire, having more sources of water, it seems to me, would be helpful. Or the possible tie-in of the Langdale water system to the Chapman system. Could you talk a little bit about some of the co-benefits that we're looking at here?
Thank you. I'll go from Great Creek down. I think the big benefit of developing Great Creek for a large volume as possible would allow, in case there's a situation where, let's say there's our main water main in Roberts Creek has a failure, then and Chapman Creek would be offline as well, we would have a major water supply in the Shishot area, which I think is essential in terms of redundancy. So that's where I see the big benefit of developing Great Creek. So it's a backup for the Chapman system for the Shishot area. Langdale system, the big benefit of that is that it would allow Langdale system to be connected to the Chapman system, and allows even which will provide Langdale customers with the backup water supply if their water well would fail. Currently, the backup system for Langdale is the Hopkins system, so they currently have a backup. But the Hopkins system is has some challenges as well in terms of the water supply. So connecting it to the Chapman system would definitely increase their resilience. And Maryanne, the big benefit there is that it might allow us to, it's really a backup also to the Roberts Creek area. Because it's so close, we can easily get it into Elphinstone, Roberts Creek area, and even up to Shishot, that will be no problem. So all three systems have their unique, provides a local opportunity to provide water locally. And actually, Maryanne, I talked about it with staff from Town of Gibsons. If we were to develop that, we might also put in a connection there to the Town of Gibsons, so that in case there might be some water flowing back and forth between that area and Town of Gibsons if necessary.
Super. Thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to follow up a little bit with Director Ties is talking about the aquitard and that word, if you mentioned it in the Town of Gibsons, is a very hot word to mention. The aquitard creates flaming. So there does seem to be some opinion or subjectivity or interpretation of what an aquitard actually is the last drill wells. So that there is an aquitard at the Mahon Road. So we're really talking about a lower permeability and a subjectivity to risk. So I think some of this understanding of how the aquifer works, this wonderful maybe even $1 billion worth of infrastructure underneath our feet over in the Town of Gibsons area, E&F, it's a lot of money tied up in that aquifer. This understanding to show the public, I think that the goal is a sustainable yield from this resource somehow. And I think that this is what needs to be communicated is it's not just the town getting something, and it's not just Roberts Creek, it's an integrated sustainable yield, the bigger picture. And I think we might be getting lost in the words sometimes about how thick the aquitard is versus kind of the goal. So maybe the consultant might have some words on how you interpret an aquifer, like aquitard, the permeability and the risks. If you have anything to say about how you define that there was no aquitard versus someone else might interpret it to be a low permeability aquitard, if you could say something about that.
You're muted.
You're muted, Ineke.
Okay, sorry about it. Thank you. Yes, so an aquitard is basically formation that has a
I think her internet connection is not as stable as we would hope.
Yeah, we're having technical difficulties.
Well, just imagine some brilliance.
Right. So what I'm going to do is, until we resolve the technical difficulties, if you don't mind, Director Hiltz, we'll move on to Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Question is more for staff anyway, so this is okay. But would any water main upgrades be required for Great Creek for increasing either our surface supply or tapping into an aquifer?
Thank you for the question. If we were to develop the well side, the water flow would be just sufficient to provide water to Swanwick and St. Hugh area. So there would be no additional upgrades required for the surface water intake. If we were to design it such that it provides similar flow to what we currently can draw in the summer, we have proven that we can provide that into Sechelt without any further upgrades to the water mains. So for Great Creek, there is no need for any water upgrades. That might be different for if we, in the point in the future, were to develop Maryanne West. We currently, it was included in last week's quarterly report. We have a design ready to upgrade water mains in Chester. And if we were to develop Maryanne, we might need to upgrade those water mains to bigger size. So we would need to do some water modeling first to confirm if those mains will need to be upgraded before we actually decide to upgrade the mains there, because we don't want to upgrade the mains and 2 years later have to do it again.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're back in business. Technical difficulties resolved. So perhaps we could go back to Director Hiltz's question and our consultant.
Yeah, sorry about this. It is each time it freezes up, so I'm not sure what happens. So yeah, I was talking about the aquitard. So that's lower permeable formation. So the whole idea about regarding an aquitard is that it is a protective layer above the aquifer. So so in the Maryanne West Park area, there is some formation that is more compact above the aquifer, but it's not an aquitard in terms of silt and clay. Like from a health point of view or a protective point of view, when they talk about we need an aquitard, they really talk about a clay silt aquitard. So, and that's in that particular area of the Gibson's aquifer, when they refer to an aquitard, that's what they have there. And that's not present at the Maryanne West Park site. Does that answer the question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Tyus.
Thank you. Going back to pipes, because Alton or Director Toth was on that vein. So Langdale well, apparently, as I understand it, aesthetic contamination just means it might not be the prettiest water coming out with some iron and manganese in it. Might have some brown tints to it when you fill your bathtub, that sort of thing. I don't know if I get that correctly. And if we want to blend it with, say, Church Road well water, which I would think is the closest one, then how would that be accomplished, and how does that add extra cost? And if treatment is needed, then how would that be accomplished, and what is the extra cost?
Lots of questions there. Who wants to tackle that?
Maybe you can clarify the treatment process that would be required to remove any iron or manganese. If it's confirmed that that would be required, then we can follow up after that. I think your internet connection froze again. So, yeah, we lost her. She will be back. So the plan is the idea is to do some further work this year to confirm if manganese levels will continue to be high, or if it just was one spike. If so, there would be an opportunity to add some filtration at site to allow for that to be removed prior to it going into the system. We wouldn't dilute it or something. It would be removed prior to entering into the system.
Thank you. Right, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I have so many questions about Grey Creek, given that it's so near and dear to my home. Has the upgrading of the surface intake been looked at in the past? Despite, contamination potential, turbidity, what have you. I mean, it seems like an easy win. So I'm just wondering what changed to bring that back into focus.
Perfect question. We looked at the options in the past to do so. I think what changed is that we have a better understanding of what the costs are associated with other water supply sources. We have now a better understanding of what it actually would cost to develop a well field at Church Road, what it would cost to develop a well field at Langdale, including all the main replacements, etc., that are required there. So while and at the same time, the costs for treatment processes have decreased over years. What was innovative 5 years ago with a significant price tag is now less significant. So I think it's those two developments that we have a better understanding of. We can actually compare 2.5 million with something else. And several years ago, 2.5 million was like, or 3 million at the time was like, no, that's we first need to look at something else. And now it's like, okay, let's put it in the context of what else we've learned. And we were like, maybe it's better bang for the buck than doing the groundwater development at that site, given the location where we were able to drill.
Awesome. I'm going to come back to the iron and manganese, but I had a related question here. There was a very nice chart in the presentation that showed the cost for each site per, I think, 1,000 cubic meters. How does that compare to our treatment plant, our Chapman treatment plant?
I don't have the number for Trevor. I'm not sure if we have the number for Chapman at hand, because it would have to include the actual construction cost from back then. But it would be way cheaper, for sure, because it's gravity fed, while in this case there was always pumping involved. And Chapman is just an ideal system, and it's a large volume that we can treat at site. And Grey Creek, in a way, surface water systems are usually cheaper to operate than groundwater systems. That's why we included the hydro cost. Groundwater systems always are associated with significant amount of hydro cost. So the more you use them, the more you have to pay, and that's not the case for that's lesser the case for surface water intake, like gravity-fed surface water intake, like we have at Chapman.
All right, that was interesting. Thank you. And so back to the question of how you remove iron and manganese, if necessary, from the water. Our consultant tackle that one?
I'm sorry, about iron and manganese.
How do you remove it?
Well, there are certain treatment methods for it to remove it.
Will those require a large building, or will they require a small building, or how would it work?
Okay. Well, I think probably that can accommodate in the existing housing or the proposed housing. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Hey, thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions in the queue right now. Do I see? I see one more. Director Tyus.
I guess we might be moving on in the report now to the options. So I'm just wondering if we want to discuss those. And I'm just kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm taking your job away. Sorry, Chair.
Well, I was kind of hoping for a motion. I'm looking out there. Director Seegers, always to the rescue.
Thank you. I'm willing to make a recommendation, but I don't like the one, the second part of that with regards to Maryanne West Park. Yeah, and so I'm sure, our GM has some recommendations. My concern is, I want to make sure the community's aware of what we're doing, and the optics of this recommendation indicates we're looking at developing a well field there. I don't want it to say that, but I know we need to do some work. So GM Rosenboom to the rescue.
Thank you. My suggestion would be to change the recommendation as is to state that staff presented 2021 round 1 budget proposal for groundwater investigation phase 3 project. Based on the recommended next steps in this report for the development of a well field at the Langdale site, and to confirm the feasibility of the Maryanne West Park site, including the implementation of a monitoring program.
All right. Director Beamish, does that fit with what your community would be in favor of?
I think it might be nice to say that continued investigation in concert with Ministry of Environment and the town of Gibson's, because it is kind of working together on that, so that to let people know that is happening.
Okay.
I would change it to the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And the town of Gibson's. Okay.
Just technical.
Okay. So I'll make those recommendations with the amendment as provided by GM Rosenboom and Director Beamish.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? I see a seconder. Excellent. Is the recording secretary happy with this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do we have further discussion or questions on the motion on the floor? Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. And thank you to Director Seegers for putting those amendments forward, because I'm as well, I echo those comments. I am very concerned about having a well going into the same aquifer where we have a number of residents that are already getting their water from there, and where we're already under development. The addition of the monitoring well, though, I think does help with furthering the information that to help map the rest of the aquifer, which will be beneficial to the entire area and working together. I worry that about making it into a production well at some point, because I think this does start putting us down that road a bit. I'm happy to support the amendment as it is, but I'm cautiously supporting because I don't want us to put this into a production well if it is going to affect the aquifer. And I know the addition of a monitoring well may have the potential of of affecting it, but I defer to the experts on this, but I do not want to affect any water supply for the Gibsons area.
Staff, please.
Thank you for those comments, Director. It's well understood that we will never get our water license if we were in any way, if there would be any chance to affect any of the other water rights in the area, including those of the town of Gibsons. And that has been made very clear by the province. And that's why, because there is an uncertainty about the actual recharge, because it's estimated that it's actually higher. There's agreement amongst the consultants that it could be higher than what we currently know. That's what we need to confirm. If it's not the case, there might be an opportunity for us to actually pursue a well development on that site, and that's what we need to confirm. So, given that there might be an option, staff recommend to advance it in terms of collaborating on the monitoring and see what's possible, but we fully realize that we should do it in such a fashion that we're not going full into and then end up with a lot of sunk cost, because we might not get a license. The intent is to improve our collaborative understanding of the aquifer, which is benefiting us regardless of a decision of we develop the well site or not.
Excellent. Thank you. We all know about sunk costs like Site C. So, Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. One question and one comment. The question is around option 1, as in the recommendations on page 8. It says there, option 1, if I'm not mistaken, is $661,000, and then option 2 would be $100,000. So my question is there would option 2 delay the process in any way at this point? Like if we reduce the price tag in the short term? And is option 1 more risky as there may be some issues in permitting? So if you could just kind of elaborate a little bit on that, and I'll do the comment later. Thanks.
Okay, staff.
Thank you. To be clear, for the people that don't have to report in from them, this is related to Maryanne West Park. Option 1 includes the drilling of wells, a full production well to confirm actually from a diversion perspective the potential yield, and to do the monitoring program. Option 2 is to only do the monitoring program, make a decision, and confirm the actual potential of the well development on the site at a later point in time. The risk of going more full in with the development of a well field is that, yes, it would provide us with more information, but there is also a higher cost associated with it that we might have to consider a sunk cost moving forward if we decide to not proceed with the well development at its site. It will delay the development of Maryanne West Park at least for a year. But as staff, we feel that is appropriate to, given what we just discussed in terms of other rights holders in the area, to take a more cautious approach there and potentially submit a water license application this year based on what we know now from the area. But just to put our application in the queue, because as we all know, in terms of water licenses, it's first in, first come, first serve. So we might just put in a water license application, but not to do any further work on it in terms of technical analysis until we have the confirmation that we actually want to move forward with a well development at that site.
Good. Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, supportive of the amendment and the recommendation, and just the Maryanne West discussion is laying out the timeline. It would be the very last of all of these steps. Like we got Church Road 2022, Grey Creek 23, Langdale 2024, Maryanne West 2026. So it's kind of it would be the last source to bring online if it's feasible and licensable and all of that. That's kind of how staff sees this, putting your tarot cards down there and what's the future look like. That's kind of what we're looking at.
Thank you, that's correct. If we were to indeed develop the surface water intake at Grey Creek and Langdale in upcoming years, we would be able to meet this to address the water supply deficit for 2025. Maryanne would be the first step to actually address it for 2035. So if it's 2026 or 2027, it would not really impact our ability to maintain stage 2 in the summer.
Thank you very much. Director Beamish.
Yeah, I think it's appreciate the comments around the Gibson's Aquifer area. I mean, I think what we're finding is that the work on Church Road, the work on Maryanne West, all of this is adding to our knowledge of that area. And as we go forward, we're gaining. I do understand, as the GM mentioned, that we're maybe even learning more, that the recharge is even greater than our previous analysis had indicated. So there may be more capacity there. We do have a well that's currently awaiting coming online in production in Gibson's as well. And so I don't know what the impact once that comes online could be on the Maryanne West well. So a lot of knowledge being gained, and I appreciate the cost approach. And I also appreciate the commitment to working together on this in this particular sensitive area. It's very important to the town, as we all know, and to the rest of the regional district. So caution, but working together on it is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Ties.
Thank you. Back to my comment. I just wanted to say around the communication strategy that I feel that we also do need to stress that the key to not having these now considerable future infrastructure in costs increase even more is also an approach where we use conservation and water meters as part of our strategy moving forward. So I don't want people to think that that we'll now have enough water and that we don't need the water meters anymore. I think if we want to look towards the future and 2030 and beyond, then we do need to implement those water meters as well. And I think that needs to be part of that communication strategy, especially with our plans moving forward. Thank you.
Staff, please.
Sorry, I was muted. On the topic of engagement, this report will be presented as well on a February 1st meeting with our Water Supply Advisory Committee, and we'll be discussing with them. And that is just several days before round 1 budget, or when this budget proposal will be presented at round 1 budget. So I can do a debrief at round 1 on any recommendations from WASAC.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else in the queue, so I am going to call the question on the motion on the floor. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. That was a very interesting report. It's great to have more information with which to make our decisions. And I think it's fair to say that we have pretty abundant groundwater sources in this area. We're very fortunate. So I think we will thank our consultant. for the excellent presentation. And then I am going to call a 10-minute break, and we'll resume again at 11 a.m. with garbage. Thanks, everyone. All right, I am calling us back to order for the next installment in this exciting special Infrastructure Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, January the 20th. We are getting a very first look at our future waste disposal options. We're first going to invite our consultant to present, and then we are going to have a staff report. So I believe we are now up. Mr. Yang, it's over to you.
Hi there, Wilbert Yang here, and I am going to give you a little presentation. Now, will I need to share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to do that.
Okay.
Good.
Does everyone see my screen right now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, anyways, thank you very much for having me at your meeting. And this is with regards to future waste disposal options for the SCRD. And this is an analysis that we did for the regional district to look at how waste can possibly be managed 30 years into the future once the landfill closes. So this is a little outline of my presentation today. I'll do a quick introduction of myself, as well as look at the two parts that we have completed so far, which is looking at the demand analysis, how much waste will be disposed of in the future that needs to be taken into consideration, as well as the disposal options that we looked at as part of the study. Once we've done that, we will analyze the options and provide you with some conclusions. So a little bit about myself. My name is Wilbert Yang. I am a senior waste management engineer. I have 30 years of experience, and previous to working with Tetra Tech, I worked for the BC Ministry of Environment, where I did a lot of permitting and regulation writing for solid waste discharges. I also work for Metro Vancouver, where I developed a lot of the waste diversion programs that are in place right now in the Metro Vancouver region. And now I am a consultant working for Tetra Tech and working on waste management projects across North America. For the demand analysis, what we did was we looked at what would happen once the landfill closed to get an understanding of how much waste are we looking at to managing over the next 30 years. So we took into consideration population growth over 30 years, which is up to 2056. We also took into consideration the disposal rate for the last 3 years. You average them out and apply them to growth projections for the population. We took into consideration as well as waste composition results. So that will help in terms of determining what the disposal rates would look like if there was no diversion in place versus a higher degree of diversion implemented in the future. So what we came up with is a graph in terms of what the disposal rates would look like in the future once landfill closes. Generally speaking, the disposal rate for the SCRD would range between about 14,500 tons a year to 21,000 tons per year over time. So that quantity basically will increase as you move into the future and the population in the regional district grows. Over that 30-year period, that is approximately a little over 500,000 tons of waste that will need to be managed. So what we have here is we have two lines. We have one line in terms of if things stayed the same in terms of the level of services in the SCRD, and what it would also look like if more diversion programs were put into place, how that would change. So in terms of the disposal options that we are looking at siting a new landfill, as well as option 2, which is third-party disposal, which in some jurisdictions they call it waste export. We also looked at waste to energy or using waste as a fuel source. And we also looked at possible options in terms of expanding the landfill. So for option 1 of siting a new landfill, we basically looked at various criteria that's required in new landfills these days. There is the landfill criteria, which is put together by the Ministry of Environment. And these are some of the criteria that we have looked at in terms of trying to see whether there's suitable locations in the regional district. And with this information, what we were able to do is apply that to 3 areas that that was deemed to be potentially viable for a landfill in the regional district. So what we have is an area that's called Half Moon Bay, which is actually to the northeast of Half Moon Bay, not actually near the town. And we have 2 other locations. One is a mine site near Egmont, as well as properties or areas in the hillside, which is just north of Langdale. So in terms of the first area, which is the Half Moon Bay site, what we found is, you can see where Half Moon Bay is located here. We basically delineated an area that is to the northeast that could potentially be used. And what we found is there are quite a number of areas where there's sufficient land to site a new landfill. Generally speaking, the green hatched areas are areas that have some environmental sensitivities, but we can look at it in terms of how those are potential areas that could be cited for a landfill with some engineering requirements put in place. What we also found was that for a 30-year disposal of a facility, we require about 3.3 hectares of property. But at the same time, you would like, it's ideal to have buffers around the landfill. So we'd be targeting a property that's at least 10 hectares in property, in size. And this is just examples of 3 locations in the Half Moon Bay area that could potentially be cited. So these boxes here that are red and white, that is kind of a 10 hectare parcel that could be located in this area over here. So you can see that there are quite a number of areas where a potential landfill could be located. As for the other 2 areas, Area 2 and Area 3, we looked at them to see whether there's some opportunities there. And for Area 2 anyways, we found that citing a facility near that site is quite exhaustive because it is quite remote and it will require a fair amount of infrastructure to move material to that area. So from that perspective, it was not favorable. Not to mention on the other side of the Skookumchuck Narrows is a provincial park. So there certainly could be some concerns or questions with regards to being located in close proximity to the park. We looked at the hillside property, which is this property over here, right by Port Mellon. And the terrain there is quite steep. And I think in terms of siting a landfill, it'll be quite challenging. And there are a lot of issues with regards to geohazards as well as water features, which would limit the feasibility for a landfill in that location. What we did find is that in terms of potentially locating a transfer station there, that is one area that could be suitable if that is an option the regional district wants to pursue. So in terms of high level, what the cost would be in terms of siting a new landfill, the capital cost for a new landfill that would suit the regional district's needs would probably be in the range of $9.5 to $13.5 million. And operating costs would be about $2.5 to $3.5 million per year. Putting that into context of your capital cost and your operating costs, which is your landfill, CapEx, OpEx, you're looking at a disposal system that would cost between 157 to 220 tons per year. That number does take into consideration siting and approval costs, which is probably one of the biggest challenges for siting new landfills these days, which would include a $1 million as part of the capital costs. In terms of option two is disposal at a third-party facility, also known as waste export. It requires that all the waste collected from the regional district would be taken to a transfer station that would need to be built, and that material would be taken there and basically reloaded onto trailers. From there, that material would be moved off the peninsula and moved to a rail system where it would be loaded onto trains and then off to the disposal facility, wherever that may be. I think in terms of what's an important consideration for this option is to have a transfer station that's strategically located on commercial industrial land so that the community can move materials there efficiently, as well as being reloaded so it can be taken to a third-party facility. Being located on a peninsula, there certainly will be additional costs in terms of getting that material to the mainland, and so there will be additional costs in terms of barging or ferrying that material off the region. Where that material would then be taken is it will be driven off to the rail system and then taken to disposal facilities. And these disposal facilities could be Columbia Ridge in Oregon State or Robanco in Washington State. Both these facilities are fairly close to each other in around southeastern Washington State, or it could potentially go to Cache Creek, which is considering opening up their landfill again. So there's certainly a lot of options in terms of disposal. And if this is something that the regional district wants to pursue, there would be a request for tenders or quotes in terms of what the market wants to provide, is willing to provide. In terms of capital costs for this, or in terms of costs for this option, we took into consideration the cost for building and operating a transfer station. We also looked at the cost of hauling that material from the transfer station and taking it to the disposal facility. So in terms of capital costs for a new transfer station, you can have something very simple in terms of a outdoor facility that top loads waste into trailers, which could cost in the $2 million range, or we can have something that's a little bit more sophisticated that's inside a building and has other recycling and waste diversion features, which, what we've seen in the southeast portion of British Columbia be costing somewhere around $5.5 million. We also looked at it in terms of operating costs. And that operating cost does take into consideration operation of the transfer station as well as hauling and disposal of that material. And that would range from about $3.7 million to about $6 million a year. And all in with the cost of the transfer station, the cost of hauling, you're looking at a disposal system that would be around $210 to $350 a ton, depending on what kind of responses you received for hauling and disposal of materials. A third option was waste to energy, looking at thermal treatment of the waste that's produced from the SCRD. What we did find is that because of the limited feedstock that comes out of the SCRD, we're looking at a technology that would be processing at a minimum of 50 tons per day. One thing that's important to take into consideration with waste energy is the fact that a disposal system for the ash is still a requirement. So that is something to take into consideration. And at the same time, these facilities do require annual maintenance. And when it is being maintained and shut down for maintenance, it will be approximately 5 to 8 weeks a year where that facility will be down, and some system will need to be in place in terms of managing the waste that's coming in during that time. So certainly there are a lot of operational challenges in terms of managing waste using a waste energy option. Some of the challenges, like I said, is residuals management. Take into consideration that there might be 90% reduction in the volume of waste, but at the same time, you still need to find a system to manage that, properly dispose of that material. Annual maintenance is an issue because Like I said, 5 to 8 weeks a year, you'll need to find alternative disposal options for the garbage that is collected from the regional district. There will be emission monitoring requirements, which, you know, annual monitoring or quarterly monitoring of the air discharges is going to be an important consideration. And I think in terms of waste to energy, the energy recovery portion, you also need to find an end user for the heat that will be generated from this facility. So finding a market for that material is quite important, because it would be one reason that would help with offsetting the high costs. Because the regional district doesn't generate high quantities of waste, certainly the regional district is very limited in terms of what kind of energy recovery options are available. And generally, for a facility that's about 50 tons a day, your energy recovery options are limited to hot water and steam, which would probably be best suited for district heating. From an economic perspective, the capital cost of a facility would be somewhere around $29 or $30 million. Operating costs would be about $3.3 million a year. And bring that all together in terms of the unit disposal costs. And that includes disposal of materials off-site whenever the facility is down. We're looking at close to $240 per ton. I think one thing that's important about our cost estimates is that we don't include the cost of property for the facility, and also the permitting and siting requirements that would be required for such a facility. So all in all, it will likely be a little bit more than $240 a ton. The fourth option we looked at is landfill expansion. What can we do with the existing site? So we looked at vertical and horizontal expansion, whether there's opportunities there. And from that perspective, this is a contour map of the site. We found that there's potentially areas where we could build a wall, engineered wall, and basically put in more materials at the landfill site to expand the airspace at the landfill. At most, what this option would do is it would increase the airspace an additional 5 years. And there will still be significant operational impacts in terms of the road. So, and at the same time, geotechnical and geological assessments will be required to confirm if that is even feasible. All in all, expanding the landfill will require a significant cost, and we estimate that it'll be about $205 to $295 per ton. And that will still require some investigation and engineering costs. But all in all, it's that cost, and it will extend the life of the landfill an additional 5 years, which might give the regional district more time in terms of securing waste disposal options. So we compared, from a cost perspective, we applied the cost on a net present value perspective, and comparing the four options. And what we see here in this diagram is that siting a new landfill is by far the least cost option. And the waste exporting is probably the second least costly option. And waste energy is by far the most costly option. We also did a multi-criteria analysis to compare all four options. And what we found was that siting a new landfill scored the highest in terms of the multi-criteria analysis. And moving towards waste export would be the second highest. We also included a high-level analysis of the positives and negatives of each option. So in terms of siting a new landfill, lowest cost option, And at the same time, it provides a regional district with more control in terms of how it manages their solid waste. Some of the negatives, the risk of receiving approval is certainly something that needs to be taken into consideration because there are technical and public considerations that need to be taken into consideration. In terms of the waste export option, it's pretty straightforward to implement, and there are pretty much no or relatively low risks in terms of receiving approval. At the same time, it is one of the higher cost alternatives, and there is certainly more risk in terms of future costs escalating as we move into the future. And looking at the last three options, the third highest is expansion of the landfill, and the lowest scoring option is waste to energy. So in terms of conclusion of our analysis, option one is certainly the highest ranked for the four options we looked at. It has the lowest cost, but at the same time, you need to take into consideration regulatory approval. There will be a lot of work will be required to address some of the technical and political challenges. In terms of the next highest ranked option would be a third-party disposal or waste export. It'll have less hurdles to deal with to address the challenges, but at the same time, it will be a higher cost option than option one. And at the end of the day, there will be less control in terms of dealing with market conditions. Option four would be the third ranked option. It has a higher cost, but it really only partially meets the future needs of the regional district in terms of its waste disposal objectives. And then the fourth ranked option is waste to energy. It has the highest unit disposal costs and and it's still likely to have a lot of challenges in terms of getting regulatory approval. And I think one thing is you still require disposal options in terms of disposal of the residual ash and garbage that will be generated when the facility is down for maintenance. And that is my presentation.
Thank you. If you can stop screen sharing, we'll get back into Hollywood Squares mode. Thank you very much. What we're going to do next, I see there's a question. Can the question wait until we do the staff report, or is this a pressing question? Aha, the hand has gone down. All right. In that case, I'm going to invite GM Rosenboom or Manager Cooper to give the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. The purpose of this report is to seek board direction on next step with respect to development of the future options for the disposal of the solid waste once the current landfill has reached its maximum capacity. The presentation you just received from our consultant provides a summary of the findings of the first two phases of the project. Based on these findings, staff recommend to proceed with confirming the feasibility of the development of a new landfill at a potentially feasible location in the Harman Bay area. This work would include more technical, operational, land use, regulatory, and financial confirmation of this potential. Staff recommend to confirm the same aspects for the development of a transfer station to facilitate the transport of waste off coast, most likely to third-party landfill in BC or elsewhere or in the United States. Staff will be able to present the findings of this project phase in Q2 2021 and are proposing to advance with the detailed design, costing, and public participation process around feasible options in Q3 2021. Staff will be more than happy to answer any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, questions? Director Ties.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I have a lot of questions. The first one is around greenhouse gas emissions. And our landfill right now is our largest greenhouse gas emitting part of our operation, and an organic span, of course, is going to help that. But my question is, how do these rank in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? I would assume that exporting waste to another landfill is even higher in greenhouse gas emissions than having one locally. And then, but I'm not sure where the waste to energy fits in. So if you could enlighten us on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, the best case scenario is energy in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and the next would be waste export, and the high GHG emissions would be expansion of landfill or new landfill. At the same time, infrastructure can be put in place in terms of capturing the greenhouse gases and using it for other materials.
Okay, follow up. Why is waste export less greenhouse gas intensive than landfilling locally when you have to transport all the garbage to another landfill where it will do exactly the same thing as in a local landfill?
The larger landfills tend to have much more extensive greenhouse gas collection. So the amount of gas that would be coming off would be significantly less, or how much would be captured would be significantly more. At the same time, the cost of transportation or transportation is not a significant contributor to greenhouse gas. It is a contributor, but in terms of how to landfill gas is significantly more.
Thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. The waste to energy, the 70% diversion. So if you could say something about what that means, is it sounds like unless you achieve 70%, the province won't even consider it. And what could be in that 70% diversion? We're at 56 or something like that now. So if you could just fill in some details about that criteria from the regulatory perspective.
Yes, so the province of BC does have a requirement, not a requirement, but a policy in terms of before they would approve any kind of waste energy to be put in place, they would require that the regional district is achieving a minimum of 70% diversion in their community. So what that would mean is having waste diversion measures like recycling and organics diversion in play, as well as looking at reduce and reuse opportunities for that material. Ultimately, it's being able to show that 70% of the material is being diverted from disposal, and less than 30% is actually requiring disposal.
I'm just going to jump in for a minute and ask if many communities manage to achieve 70%, because I know we've been stalled around in the mid 50s somewhere for years.
Yes, so I think the best communities are in the mid 60% range, and depending on how you consider it from a residential perspective, a fair number of communities are achieving 70% diversion from a residential perspective. But when you factor in the commercial sector waste streams, they tend to bring it down significantly. So the best communities are achieving between 60 and 70% diversion in BC.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I noticed you looked at waste to energy. I've been reading a lot in the last number of years about waste conversion technology. And I know that there are plants out there that are not necessarily in production, but piloting it in various areas. Have you looked at that? Is that something that's considered? Where does that technology lie at this point?
So we have looked at those technologies, and we've actually worked with a lot of companies that are considering those technologies. It is still very much in the research phase or a non-commercial phase. There's a lot of work involved And it is not really commercially viable at this time for a lot of these technologies. There's a lot of risk. And I think a good example is the city of Edmonton actually has a gasification technology. It was built in 2012. It cost $200 million to build. And it's arguable whether it's actually run for more than a month ever since. So there's a lot of risk in terms of spending that money and not having that facility run effectively.
It's too bad, because I mean, that would deal with, all of the things that we're currently burying, and it would basically, what they do is they put them back to their initial components, right? So you can reuse them.
Yes.
It'd be nice to see that moving forward.
Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, sort of, for places that have gone waste to energy, do you know of any jurisdictions or facilities that run into issues with regards to zero waste initiatives, things like that, reducing their inputs below a minimum level? I've heard some concerns that by the time you spend the millions of dollars to build a waste energy facility, you basically have to maintain a certain amount of garbage input in order to keep it running and make it pay for itself, which is counter to the whole idea behind going zero waste.
It's certainly a challenge to manage a waste energy facility. And when I worked for Metro Vancouver, I was in charge of managing the ash from that waste energy facility. And some of the operational changes or challenges were making sure that you are sending the minimum amount of material to that facility to kind of keep it operating. So at the same time, because Metro Vancouver had other disposal options in play, they were able to divert a lot of the materials to those disposal facilities and basically just be feeding the waste energy facility at its optimal capacity. Certainly what you would like is a facility that can run efficiently and of course is producing an energy stream that can be used or sold to other places, other sources. So certainly it's just a lot of operational challenges, but it's doable. It's probably more effective in larger communities where you are processing somewhere in the 500 ton per day range. So about 10 times what your community is generating right now.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Chair, question around, we've heard that getting new landfills commissioned, especially in BC, has been difficult, which leads me to the question: how are the regulatory processes different down in Washington State or in the U.S. and is that why we would be exporting to there? And then also, why did for example Cathet choose to export rather than build a new landfill? I think their topography is similar to ours. So what are the big challenges in getting a new landfill sited and operational?
So siting a new landfill is there's a lot of technical as well as public consultation that needs to happen. So certainly those things do need to be looked at together. In terms of new landfills that have been sited, Comox Valley Regional District, in the last 10 years have sited a new landfill, and they are constructing a new landfill. But certainly there's a lot of pieces in play, and it is certainly not easy to site a new landfill. But it is one of those things where if you do the work and you are successful in terms of executing your approval process, then it is a big benefit for the community because they have a more resilient and probably lower cost disposal option. So it's one of those things where it has a pro and a con.
Director Beamish.
A couple of questions, and this is more the kind of this longer term. What about the use of compaction and baling of refuse? We see that the recycle depot here in Gibson's, a lot of that stuff goes out there in square bales or bags and is easily managed. Now you can get great compaction using a compactor and baling, and then having perhaps a different way of filling the landfill by stacking as opposed to just laying it down and covering it. Does that give you does compaction give you more space and more life of a facility?
Yeah, this the regional district currently does compaction already at their landfill, and they do a fairly good job in terms of reaching those compaction rates. So, and at the same time, if there are communities in Canada where they do have a baler compactor in terms of compacting that material and putting on landfill, and it adds an extra cost in terms of doing that. But what the regional district is currently doing in terms of having their compactor going back and forth over the waste achieves the same level of compaction that are achieved.
In the long term, what about landfill mining? Is there any use of an old landfill? Can you actually recover materials from it? And is that something that we should be looking at in the longer term?
I think it really comes down to the market. I mean, if you're going to mine it, you want to make sure you have a market for that material. So there could be some fiber that you might be able to recover and some metal, but the value of that material right now is not very high. So it will be a function of finding a market, someone who's willing to buy that material, and then of course the cost of actually excavating and taking that material out of the landfill.
I just wondered if that would create space in the longer term. But
yeah, I have seen examples where communities had to move a landfill from one location to another location because of environmental issues. And by doing that, they were able to find more airspace, but it was still a very, very costly endeavor.
I should imagine so. We can mine sprockets. Director Seegers.
Thank you. You talked about that there's a timeline for the work that would need to happen for the technical and the political and the governmental process. We have somewhere around 6 years left. We're going to have a report coming up, I understand, once we've done a review.
Give or take, yep.
Yeah. What's the timeline if we choose, like the recommendation here is to start moving this process forward? What kind of timeline are we looking at? Like, would we actually get it done in the 6 years that we have left? Or are we going to be in a place where, I mean, the recommendation is we do both. We do the transfer station and we work on the landfill. So, I mean, I think it's pointing to us saying 6 years may not be enough, but I'm looking to you.
Well, in my days of working for the Ministry of Environment and permitting and so forth, 2 years for a permit is very, very favorable. So certainly it will take a number of years in terms of getting approval to site a new landfill, plus 2 years. And at the same time, designing and building a landfill will also take, a year to 3 years in terms of building. So certainly we're already at the maximum or the minimum number of time we need just to actually go ahead if everything was run perfectly. And of course, there will be challenges and hurdles along the way, which would certainly might extend the time. So that is something to take into consideration, absolutely. But it is one thing where it's important to start the process and figure out how we want to, or how you want to move forward in terms of managing the waste stream.
Thank you. I believe, Jim Rosenboom, did you have a further comment on that?
Yeah, in terms of timelines, primary reason for that staff recommend to advance transfer station is transfer station option is associated with the uncertainties with respect to the siting of a landfill. We recommend to do it in parallel so that if one fills, that we have the second one already advanced. I think the remaining landfill life does not allow us to do those steps sequential. It could even be that the development of a landfill, if it's considered to be feasible and desired, that it could still would not be available, commissioned prior to our closing date of a landfill. So there might be a need for us for a short period of time to export our waste off coast for a short period of time. And we think we would be able to accommodate that at our current landfill, to use that as a transfer station for a short period of time, but not as a long-term. It won't be a long-term option. So if we were to move everything off coast for a short period of time, there won't be a need for a dedicated transfer station only for the purpose.
Thank you very much. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. As unsexy as garbage is, it needs to be talked about. We talked previously about the current landfill, the drop-off area being designed such that it could be used as a transfer station. But with what you just said, I'm assuming that would be a transfer station to another facility here on the Sunshine Coast. It wouldn't be suitable to load stuff to go straight off coast from that facility. So I guess a sort of a follow-up question to that would be, would we look at a new landfill being open for public drop-off, or would we still be using the Seashell landfill as a transfer station and only big trucks or commercial operations could drop off at a new landfill on the coast?
Thank you for the question. I will start and invite Manager Cooper to add anything she wants to. It's a good question. We thought about it and we are not sure about it yet. Our intent would be to continue the Seashell landfill as long as possible as a drop-off station, as a drop-off site. We're currently developing it. We're making it a very modern, good facility, and we don't see the benefit of having residents from the Seashell area that they can go to both sides. So it's something we have to see how we're going to manage that, and it's even it also impacts in what are we going to do with the Pender Harbor transfer station. How does that play in, and what is the service level we would like to provide to customers on the South Coast, because from Gibson's to the landfill is already a distance, but Harman Bay is even a further distance. So it's the decisions to make around siting a new landfill in the Harman Bay area would actually require an entire review of the service delivery of the service on the coast.
Thank you. Director Tice.
Thank you. Just coming back on the greenhouse gas emissions. So a new landfill does not sound very good in regards to those. And we were told that the way that the current landfill is constructed, that carbon capture or methane capture is not really a feasible thing. I'm wondering if a new landfill, even though it's, I guess, comparatively fairly small, if it could be constructed so that those gases could be captured in the future and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from that landfill. So I do have some concerns about, raising my hand for the highest greenhouse gas emitting option.
Certainly, I think in terms of the new standards for building new landfills these days, absolutely greenhouse gas capture would be a priority. And of course, that facility would be designed to the highest standard necessary in terms of collecting greenhouse gases. And hopefully there will be options in terms of utilizing that gas, which can further offset GHG use in the regional district.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thank you. I got two. One is a follow-up on the greenhouse gas emission. So assuming there is a landfill, people getting feedback?
No, I hear you. Okay.
Okay. The GHG emissions are from the organics. So if the organics are removed from the waste stream, what would generate GHGs in a newly sited landfill. That's the GHG. And the other question is about the siting possibility. Is the Half Moon Bay area a fairly unique opportunity for a local government to site a landfill? As I'm looking at the three little, the 10-acre squares, rectangles, you can fit a lot of 10-acre squares in that area. So it looks like there's a large potential hunting ground of landfill sites. So is this a unique situation or for the Sunshine Coast compared to other areas? So the GHG, the organics, not in, no GHGs. And then how unique is this opportunity that we have to site an area, a landfill in this area?
Can we answer that, Remco, or do you want to answer it?
Go for it.
Okay, all right. So I think the most important thing is this is just, you know, this is a high level study in terms of understanding where potential options lie. And at the same time, the next step is to do a more detailed analysis to see whether the areas in the Half Moon Bay area are favorable to do that. So certainly we're not deciding right away in terms of, yes, we want to build a landfill there, but we do want to investigate it further just to see whether there are other things that we missed or, how favorable are those other areas in that area. So that is one. And in terms of, there's always, I think in terms of the topography, it is, quite, it is favorable in terms of siting a new landfill. And because it has been used as forestry land before, it is not greenfields. So there are opportunities there, and every regional district has their own, site situations that need to be taken into consideration.
And the question about GHG emissions, did we get that one?
So I think the question is, what is the main contributing factor to GHG, given that we're the SRD is planning to implement organics, disposal ban at landfill, etc. What is left that can create GHG emissions? I think that's the question. Wilbert, can you give it a try?
Oh, in terms of GHGs, so yes, certainly in terms of GHGs, decomposition of organic materials. So diverting organics from the landfill will certainly do its part in terms of reducing GHG emissions. Besides the food waste and other type of organic material, wood is also something that breaks down and creates greenhouse gas emissions. So looking at alternatives to divert and pull that material out of the waste stream will certainly be a benefit in terms of saving airspace, but also reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm 100% in favor of citing a new landfill here. It's our garbage. To just make it disappear would be irresponsible of us, whether it's to Cache Creek or whether it's to Washington State. If GHGs are higher to site our own landfill here versus exporting it, then that's something we need to look at to mitigate, to make it work. I don't think it's fair of us to dump our trash on somebody else's lawn. And I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 18 as they are.
Do I see a seconder? That is seconded. Thank you very much. Director Ties.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the question Director Seegers asked, and we may have to, our hand may be forced considering timelines as that we might need to put in an export facility for the time being before the new landfill is sited. Am I getting that correctly? And in that case, I mean, that means we're spending money on both ends, both getting a new landfill sited plus getting an export facility or I guess a dock made. And is there any opportunity to repurpose that export facility to say maybe being able to take and receive, or making it a shipping facility of some sort, whether it's containers or, I don't know, just moving stuff off and on the coast that doesn't involve the ferry, that sort of thing. Those are my, I guess that's my question.
Thank you. What we anticipate is that if we were to temporarily move our waste off coast before our new landfill could be commissioned, we are hoping that we can do that. We anticipate that we can do that with our newly designed drop-off area on a temporary basis. So at the Seashore landfill, that we can hold the trucks from there directly to a barge or to the ferry, and then up to its disposal location. There might be additional cost, operational costs associated with that, but because we might not be able to hold the material in the big trailers that they otherwise would be hauled, but that would be one of the things that we would have to explore further. But it's not the intent to build a temporary waste export transfer station only for that short period of time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pop in with a question because I noticed on the chart about waste to energy, one of the possible partnerships that was identified was pulp and paper mills. And what do you know? We have a pulp and paper mill. So the question is, was a possible partnership with the mill at Port Mellon investigated?
We did speak. Go ahead.
I connected with them, and I had some initial conversations, but they were reluctant because of the permitting issues. They're already challenged in terms of receiving a permit to or amending the permit for the current operations. So there wasn't a big welcome invitation to explore this further.
Thank you very much. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm in support of the recommendations as they are. Just another question again around timing. So we start this process, we look at potentially siting a landfill, and we do the preliminary steps for a transfer station. Should something not go forward with regard to landfill, like if the landfill was denied by the provincial government or whoever has to weigh in on this, if it was denied, what kind of timeline are we looking at to build a fully functional long-term transfer station?
What I've seen is transfer stations from design and procurement, actual construction would be about 1 to 2 years.
And we would know, if we say yes, we're going to start moving forward, we would know within 3 or 4 years whether or not a landfill could actually be sited.
Yeah, well, I think you would certainly.
I think 2 years at least, you said, yeah.
If you found an area or a couple areas that you were wanting to pursue, I think the first step would be to meet with the Ministry of Environment and start that process. And once you start that process, you'll get a better feel for what their concerns or non-concerns are, and in terms of moving forward. So certainly, you'll get a better idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. My question, well, actually, I have 2 questions. The first one is, can we get a copy of both presentations? That's good. Thank you. And my other question is, I know the large landfills actually mine the garbage before they bury it. My assumption is that we're not doing it because it's expensive, and unless we have lots of garbage, it's not a good thing to do, because somehow you think when you're mining the garbage, you're reducing your volume. So I'd like to hear comments on that.
Certainly. So there are, it's certainly it's very possible, and there are some communities that are moving forward with that. In Halifax, for instance, they have a organics ban for landfilling, and what they do is they take the garbage and they will actually compost the whole garbage pile and let it basically, degrade all the organic components before they actually put it in the landfill. That is something that certainly can be done, but it adds us another cost to it, another, $50 to $75 a ton just to process that material before it goes into the landfill. So it just adds to your disposal costs. Another option is what's called mixed waste MRFs, where that material comes through and it goes through a sorting line and they pull out all the recyclables that come out of that material and divertible materials. And then they only bury or landfill the components that are inert and there's no market for. So certainly that's another option as well too. But there are options, and it's just that it's another processing step that has a cost associated with it.
Thank you very much. Director Beamish.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with transferring our material off coast, but I guess my concern is what is the long-term viability of doing that if these other locations decide to shut down or refuse to accept materials in the future? Are we then stuck with going back to Plan A and building our own site?
That is certainly a risk. I think these companies that have these landfills, generally speaking, they're in it for the long haul. So certainly, I think they'll have a plan B because it's a very good business for them. But at the same time, things do happen sometimes where it might prevent them from bringing materials in. An example was in the I guess early 2000s where Michigan was threatening to close the borders to waste coming in from Canada, from the Toronto area. And that really kind of spurred on a lot of disposal developments for a lot of the communities that were sending materials down to the States. So certainly those are some of the areas where, control, you just don't have control, and it does become a big risk.
Thank you. Not to mention the exchange rates. Director
and
Todd.
exchange.
Thank you. This isn't necessarily, reading the report and looking at the numbers, I just came across this realization that our current disposal rates are lower than even the lowest estimated new option. So, and we have a deficit to make up for the closure of our existing landfill. So that begs the question, should we raise our disposal rates per ton, because it's inevitable. And so I don't, this isn't necessarily pertaining to this report, but it certainly for me makes me realize that maybe our current disposal fees are too low, and we need to start ramping them up to make sure that we cover our closure costs at least.
And who would like to tackle that one, if anyone?
The only thing I can add to that is that when we, and Ms. Cooper can add to that as well, is that when we presented the review of our tipping fees last fall for materials, we indicated that a review of the MSW rate could take place after some of these results were presented, because it would have it provided that context. And so that's why we haven't done it. We haven't included it last year, because we wanted to make sure that we include this kind of information in terms of putting such a review in the context. Manager, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Remco. That was pretty much what I was going to say, as well as there's an opportunity through. So once we kind of have a clearer path forward for what option or the priority option that will be followed, we'll need to be initiating our solid waste management plan update process. So there's an opportunity through that we would bring forward approaches for the MFW rate. And that's a fairly common approach that regional districts do as part of their solid waste management plan update process, is identify what those cost pressures are, where the deficits are, and then prepare even a short, medium, and a long-term rate review that then can even get incorporated into the solid waste management plan that highlights when those rate increases would happen and even at what rate.
Thank you. I have a question. Assuming that everything works out perfectly and we get a brand spanking new landfill, will it be more expensive to operate the new landfill than the old landfill? Or do we know?
I don't think we know right now, but I mean, I think after the detailed analysis, we'll have a better idea in terms of the cost for design and operation of the landfill. So stay tuned.
On that note, the only thing that I can say is that, for example, a new landfill would need to be lined, and leachate water will need to be treated in a treatment facility, and those are features that those are requirements we currently don't have. So from that perspective, I would not be surprised if operating the new landfill would be more costly because of that we would need current standards than the current one. But that's indeed ultimately to be confirmed.
Plus greenhouse gas capture.
Right. Director Seegers.
Okay, so here's another one. We're looking 30 years in the future. Why are we looking 30 years in the future? So if we go out to the community, do we look at a site for 30 years, but maybe 60 years, and instead of 10 whatever hectares or whatever, we get 20? Do we look at that right away? Do we look further into the future? Right, because I mean, we're looking at 30 years down the road, redoing what we're doing now. Yes, maybe processes will have changed. Well, then we've got more land to last us longer.
Yes, and to stretch out our capital costs over a longer period of time, potentially. 20 years is the usual amortization of the capital costs. So. What about 100-year landfill? Okay.
I think in terms of if there is an opportunity to buy more land, it is certainly very prudent to do that. Absolutely. And some of the communities, for instance, Kelowna, they have 70 to 100 years of capacity. Capital Regional District is trying to develop their program so that they have at least 100 years of capacity. So certainly it's always going to be there, and it's certainly advantageous to do more if you have that opportunity.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further hands, and we have a motion on the floor. So with no further hands, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Anyone opposed? Nobody opposed. Awesome. That passes unanimously. We have reached the end of our agenda. Director Seegers?
I'd like to, I don't know how I'd want to word something like this, but I would, as part of this analysis, I would like staff to consider a longer time frame for a landfill and incorporate that in the work that they come back on. So I don't know what you needed to say, but I think that works.
Staff, does this need to be a motion?
No, we will include it in our feasibility study, because I think one of the things we would need to, what we just added as a criteria in our further confirmation of feasibility and expansion potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you to Director Seegers for bringing that up and for GM Rosenboom's answer. because we've seen how quickly 20, 25 years can go, and 30 years, I'm sure, will go just as fast. And unless it's another year like 2020 that seems to last forever in a day, it's time moves very, very quickly. And when we're looking at the future of the coast, we need to look beyond the 30-year picture and look those multiple generations beyond. So thank you, Mr. Yang, for the report. As the director for Area B, I'm in the Half Moon Bay area. I'm really familiar with the areas that you had described in your report, and we'll look forward to bringing this to my community as well. So thank you.
Oh, I'm going to throw out a question that just occurred to me. The organics diversion hopefully would cut down somewhat on our wildlife issues. But right now, as anybody who goes to the landfill knows, the trees around the landfill are festooned with plastic bags. Is there any hope that a new landfill would be able to get over that problem?
In terms of, from my perspective, I think there's a lot of work in the area of plastics. So I think in the next 10 years, we'll certainly see a lot of new things in terms of how plastics can be managed better. And from a technology perspective, what I'm seeing is that they are looking at technologies to better manage that material. So the gasification technologies that folks might have read about, that is really catered to plastics. And if you are able to take that material and pay for that technology to process that material, you can convert that material back into its original hydrocarbon form, in which case from there it could be remade to any other material. So that is the hope for the future in the next 5 to 10 years. But the realization that there is a significant cost in terms of how that material is collected and how that material is processed, so it can be made into a marketable commodity, which could be brought back into the cycle of things. So certainly it's being looked at significantly from the federal level.
Thank you, Director Hiltz.
Yeah, thanks for indulging your question. It was with your, Mr. Yang, with your experience with Metro Vancouver, and they seem to have dropped the waste energy a number of years ago. Is that still, do you understand Metro Vancouver is kind of not pursuing that that line of waste management? You know, I'm if anything, you know, rumors included, if you know about rumors. Yeah.
Well, I think the reality is there has to be, you know, we're not at a state as a community where we can get all our materials out and managed so that we have zero waste. So the reality is their population's continuing to grow and they're still producing a lot of waste, even though the amount of waste that they're generating is a lot less than before. So there's always going to be that consideration. I think the important consideration is the City of Vancouver landfill is one of their key disposal facilities. And that facility is scheduled to close between 2030 and 2037. So they need to look at other options other than waste energy or other options for disposal. So, you know, it could mean that they will be looking at another waste energy facility, or it could mean that they will send everything down to Robenco or Columbia Ridge, similar to the options that we have in front of you. So, they are reviewing their solid waste management plan right now, and certainly that is a very sensitive topic.
And I'm just going to editorialize, since I'm chairing the meeting, that I see no prospect in the immediate future that the federal government is going to get serious about single-use plastic or about packaging. And we're at their mercy because we do not have the regulatory authority to affect the pipeline. We're at the bottom of the pipeline. We're at the receiving end of all this stuff. And so all we can do, you know, as a board is advocate to the provincial and federal government for better regulation. But otherwise, we end up just burying more garbage. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Good presentation, good questions. We are at the end of our agenda. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. See, motion seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And now I will ask if there are any questions from the gallery. We have 8 attendees still in the gallery. And I see a hand up. Just a minute, let me. Okay, Ms. Jordison.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Going back to the well development subject, I noted when the consultant was delivering her report, she identified some concerns about risks to wells from septic tanks in the areas of the Langdale and the Maryanne West well areas. Would the SCRD be interested in implementing requirements for area systems to have some form of inspection to ensure that they are operating within limits so that well infiltration doesn't happen?
Big question. Over to staff.
Thank you for that, Chair, and thank you for the question, Ms. Jordison. Septic fields are regulated by Vancouver Coastal Health in general. So any septic fields would need to meet their requirement. And currently there is, from a staff perspective, no need to introduce further regulations for residents, given that we need to chlorinate our water regardless. As part of our Vancouver Coastal Health requirement. So any water in the Chapman system will continue to be chlorinated regardless. So from that perspective, there is no need for us to address any potential risk there associated with septic fields, other than what VCH is already currently doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other hands. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So I think we can call it a day, everybody. Thank you very much.